Hello everyone and welcome to the Music Professor channel. I'm here with Loki and we're going to talk about Brahms today. And this is a first for the channel in that we've never done a long form video about Brahms. A lot of you have said over the years, let's have some Brahms. Enough with the Ravel, enough with the Stravinsky, the Beethoven, whatever it is. What about Brahms? Okay, let's do Brahms. I love Brahms, so let's get on with it. Let's do Brahms. So the focus today will be on the third of his Opus 117 intermezzi. These are wonderful, elegiac, late piano pieces from right at the end of his life. So we're going to talk about the third one. Before we get going with that, just a quick word to say, if you like the channel and everything that we do on it, please like and subscribe, press the little bell for notifications. And if you really like what we're doing, please consider donating to the channel. We have a wonderful roster of supporters and people who like what we're doing. Please feel free. In fact, I'd encourage you to join all the beautiful and generous people who give generously to the channel and support what we do. So here on the Music Professor channel today, we're going to talk about Brahms. Brahms has featured in a few shorts on the channel recently, mainly in the context of autumn. So let's kick off from that whole autumn thing because we're right in the heart of autumn now, middle of October, and it feels exactly the right season to look at Brahms's late music. So towards the end of Brahms's career, he went through various stages of retirement. You know how Frank Sinatra kept doing this? This is not like Frank Sinatra, but it's slightly like Frank Sinatra because Brahms retired and then retired again and then retired again. So we're talking the late 1880s. He was in his 50s, about my age actually. In the late 1880s, after the composition and triumphant premiere of the Fourth Symphony, Brahms was already held in very high honour in Germany, particularly among people who supported his particular version of German Romanticism. And the idea was that Brahms was the true inheritor of the classical German tradition, passing from Haydn and Mozart through Beethoven and Schubert, and sort of through Mendelssohn, Schumann to Brahms. This was the issue, not Liszt, not Wagner. So there was this polarization between the two sides, and followers of Wagner and Liszt said, no, the Beethoven, true Beethoven tradition is the radical tradition that pioneers new forms and new genres, and in Wagner's case specifically carries the symphonic radicalism of Beethoven's symphonic writing through the Ninth Symphony and the introduction of voices and so on into the music drama. That's what Wagner was very keen to stress when he was writing, just as he embarked on the Ring cycle, that Beethoven is leading to him. And the use of leitmotifs and symphonic practice in opera is a Beethovenian thing that's being carried into drama. That was Wagner's view. Brahms said no, the real Beethoven tradition is to continue writing symphonies and symphonic forms and using classical structures. So that's the big divide between the two. With the triumph of the Fourth Symphony, I think Brahms felt that he'd done enough big orchestral writing. He'd written 4 symphonies which were perfectly sufficient to demonstrate that he'd encapsulated the tradition. He wanted to devote himself from now on to chamber music, which perhaps in his heart he knew he did best. You know, he's ultimately, and this is not to say the symphonies aren't amazing, they are, but I think they really took it out of him. And the thing about chamber music was that he could devote himself to something that perhaps appealed to him more, at a deep level at any rate. Chamber music and perhaps piano music, which he'd never entirely conquered. There are some amazing early piano sonatas and some early piano pieces, and of course the piano concertos, but coming back to the piano in the 1890s, when he was around just approaching 60, this became a wonderful way of expressing who he was at this stage in his career. So what was Brahms at the end of his life, and what on earth relevance does it have to us now in the 2020s? I mean, it's a very different world, but I think Brahms's music speaks to us very powerfully. This is somebody at the height of his powers, I mean, with enormous technical and compositional skill and expertise and experience, turning his hand to intimate forms, to music that has a kind of confessional quality. He called these three intermezzi, opus 117, he called them Lullabies of My Grief. So that's a very dark title. I mean, that wasn't the official title, but that's what he said to his publisher. Lullabies of My Grief. We're talking about a relatively elderly man in 19th century terms, you know, somebody approaching 60. By modern standards, that's not old, but in the 19th century, he was getting old. Unlike most composers of the earlier 19th century, Brahms had achieved status and a kind of grandeur and a relatively lavish bourgeois life. He was able to buy as many books and scores and bottles of wine as he wished, and he was able to live in a kind of bachelor splendour in Vienna. And if he chose to attend a concert, particularly one in which his own music was being played, it was almost inevitably going to be played well. I mean, that's not something that happened to Beethoven, but by Brahms's time he had excellent orchestras, and excellent conductors who were capable of giving superb performances. So he was living in an era when that was possible, and an era in which bourgeois audiences, well, affluent German audiences, were able to turn up, and it was a sort of sign of middle-class status that you went along to orchestral concerts and you listened to Brahms, and it had that sort of, we have arrived, this is culture, let's celebrate it together and show that we in culture are aligned, and all that kind of thing. Again, it's different from our world. It's rather a solid, respectable, self-congratulatory world. But that was a world in which Brahms had achieved accolades, and he was triumphant in terms of being applauded. You know, Europe applauded him as a great composer in his own life. So there he is. He has succeeded. He's doing well. But deep down, he knows that he's a lonely, rather sad man, full of regrets about people who he's loved and disappointments. Clara Schumann, of course, we can only speculate, but we know that they remained friends all their lives. But at an earlier stage, they both clearly had very strong feelings for each other. And Robert, Clara's husband, had died and ended up in an insane asylum, and Brahms had to go and visit him there, whilst at the same time having, as I say, intense feelings for his wife, and all of that. It was very, very complicated. It was a very complicated, let's say, a very complicated 19th century situation. And we don't know exactly the nature of the relationship even. It's something of a mystery. They remained friends all their lives, but Clara wasn't the only woman that Brahms fell in love with, but for whatever reason, he seemed ultimately unable to form close attachments. And so there he is at the end of his life. And the music, I mean, let's not go into the biography unnecessarily. The music is full of regret. I think that's all we need to really focus on, that somehow it recognises that you can be a success, you can be acknowledged as a leading figure in your field and still be a lonely and regretful human being. We're dealing with very interesting human characteristics here, and we've talked a lot in shorts recently about autumn. There is an autumnal character to Brahms's late music. So here we go. Let's look at the material of the music. So this is the third intermezzo. It's in C sharp minor.